If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this, people who have seen something they could never explain. What was the thing? Shortly after my mother passed away, I was going through and organizing her belongings in her room. I was talking out loud as if I were talking to her. There were some boxes with family photo albums I'd been looking for that I hadn't been able to find, and it was really worrying me. I was sitting on the floor and said aloud, "Where did you leave those albums, Mom?" Very slowly, her closet door opened on its own. A slow, creaking movement from nearly totally closed to halfway open. I was as terrified as I'd ever been in my life. I froze and didn't move, but I looked at exactly eye level, and there was a cardboard box labeled albums in my mother's handwriting on the lower shelf of the closet. I am not a religious or even spiritual person, and I thought that there might be some imbalance in the hanging of the closet door. I went back to the door many times and tested it by wiggling it back and forth and leaving it in different positions, but it's never moved that way since. I fly helicopters for a living. I was working on a power line one year and was going back to our landing zone and noticed an opening in the trees, what appeared to be a leg. I came back and tried to get as low as I could into the clearing, thinking it was a person. It was a full-grown cow that had been completely skinned. There were no farms around and the animal didn't appear to be cut up in any way. I went back to the landing zone, picked up one of my ground crew members and flew back with him just so he could verify that I wasn't crazy. The flight back, we were both kind of in awe because we have no idea how that animal got to where it's at. Even more so that it had no skin on its entire body. It looked like a perfect cow sand skin. When I was 18 years old, I was driving home from a friend's house with another friend. We were on the highway doing about 110 km/h, 70 miles per hour, and made this trip often. It's a big highway between two towns, so just fields either side. Something on two legs ran alongside my car. I saw it in the rear view mirror and out my side window. It was not a kangaroo, it was human-like. Had long arms and obviously extremely fast. My friend saw it too, and then it just went off the road back into the grass. Neither of us could explain it. I live outside city limits. There are very few houses near my home and many tall bushes and trees around the house. There is a small mountain at some distance. The nights are very quiet and there is no street lights, so after dark the only lights are the lights from my house and the moonlight. There are two trees a little far from my house that are standing close to one another. One night while I was outside my house with a flashlight doing something, I realized there was only one of those trees. I looked around that tree with my flashlight, but there was no sign of the other tree, like it never existed. The next day I went there during daytime to see exactly what happened to the other tree, and they both were there just like I remembered. I looked around them and even climbed on them to see anything strange, but nothing was out of ordinary. My ex-boyfriend is a diagnosed schizophrenic, and he often told me about the things/people he saw and heard. One summer, on several late nights, he kept seeing a big, dark creature in the middle of the road on the way to drop me off home. He'd stop the car in a panic and wake me up. I'd always fall asleep on the way home, and tried to get me to see this creature. I never saw anything, so I told him it was probably his schizophrenia. Well, on one night I stayed awake on the drive home and I saw the damn creature in the road. It had the body of a huge bear, long horse-like legs, it didn't seem to have a neck, it was blacker than night, and had a glowing white Cheshire grin. I said, "What the duck is that?" And my boyfriend said, "See, I've been trying to tell you." We watched it cross the road and disappear in thin air. That was the last time he and I ever saw the thing. This was about 10 years ago. When I was 20 years ago, my parents took me on a fishing trip with some family friends. There was a huge lake with fishing lodges that you can rent for the day and you can catch and cook your fish there. Around 7 p.m., it was turning dark, everyone was gathering for dinner as I was standing at the edge of the lodge looking down at the lakeshore when I spotted a strange creature walking on the shore towards the water on all fours. It looked nothing like anything I'd ever seen before that and up until now. It was about the size of a large German shepherd, had a long tail that was dragging along on the sand, which at first made me think of a giant platypus, obviously not a native species where I'm from, Vietnam. Its body was a bit flat, but not as flat as a turtle, and it walked like a mammal, not waddling like a turtle on land. On its back was a dorsal fin, and as it entered the water, the fin protruded the surface and steered like you'd normally see shark fins in the movies until it disappeared completely into the dark waters. After all these years I still don't know what it was, even though I've been a huge animal nerd since I was 4. I was the only one who saw it because everyone was preparing dinner. No one believed me either. The creature was 20 to 30 meters away from me and it seemed unbothered by the presence of humans on a weekend trip. 8 years old. I lived in an old trailer park. The place had some serious Stranger Things vibes thinking back on it. One night I was in bed and it got really cold in my room. I get up and see if the window was open. It was. I shut and lock it. I go back to bed. Not much later the room is cold and I get up to check the window. Open again. I slammed it in a fit of childish rage and locked it again and made sure the window was locked. I even tried lifting on it to see if it would slide open. It didn't. So victorious, I go back to bed. It's cold. Yet again. Now I am pissed off. I go to the window. It's closed. My door to my bedroom slowly closes shut. I look over at the sound of it shutting. Then hear something on my bed. I look over towards my bed and there's a set of disembodied eyes floating over my bed. They weren't really giving off light. So I can't say they were glowing. But as dark as it was at my room, I still could see them. I had a tiny softball bat near my closet. I swung at them screaming and the bat actually connected to whatever it was and broke. They vanished and I got a nasty splinter from the wooden bat in my hand. I yelled for mom or dad but of course they never show up. My dog does though and is scratching at my door. I let him in and he stays with me all night. Watching the window. One night I was skating home, but wanted to smoke a bowl before getting there so I stopped at the business strip that's right by my apartments. While unpacking my bowl a car pulls into the parking lot and I'm looking but doing own thing. I see a person get off the car in front of the building across the parking lot. The car leaves and the person stands in front of the building doing nothing. I keep casually glancing over but I notice that this person is not moving at all. It was kinda creepy so at this point I stop what I'm doing and I'm looking trying to focus my vision to see what they're doing but I can only see the person's shadow standing right across from me in the dark. I haven't even smoked my bowl because the fact that this man appeared to be looking straight at me annoyed me. I continue staring for another 10 seconds or so and I notice him starting to move in very unusual and distorted movements. Especially the arms and the torso. I start getting this very uneasy feeling yet I can't keep my eyes off this shadow. I stare to make sure my eyes are not playing tricks on me because there is no way. But I clearly see this humanoid shadow moving very oddly. I don't take my eyes off it, but immediately put everything back in my backpack and freaking take off as fast as possible. It was the strangest thing. Booked an authentic French cottage for a vacation when I was a kid. It was in a rural hamlet, somewhere in the depths of Brittany. Turned up first evening, and we were supposed to let ourselves in. The place was a tip, with the bed stripped and bedclothes wet on the line. There was a peacock randomly tethered in a cage in the back garden. Upstairs, we explored the bedrooms, and found one bedroom older than the rest, with a traditional Breton-style bed, with doors that closed around it. It was the only one not stripped bare. There was nothing else in that room, save for a framed painting on the wall. The painting showed a little girl in a white dress, standing against a chintzy countryside backdrop. We walked out the bedroom, and out the house. There was no way we could stay that night, and thankfully checked into a local B&B. Once we were of the house, my mother announced that we absolutely were not setting foot in that house again. She went on to explain that she didn't want to say anything at the time to scare me, but as we left the Breton bedroom, she noticed that the little girl in the painting had changed position, and was suddenly pointing at the bed. Now, my mother is not prone to dramatics, or a believer in anything paranormal. But the look on her face told me she was deadly serious. We never went back to that house. I honestly shudder to think what might have happened if we'd stayed a night there. Plus. The peacock. WTF. Boy in the woods. This happened to me when I was a teenager. I think it was the spring of 1998 when I was 14. My Boy Scout troop went hiking in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas. I grew up in a very small town in Tennessee, and the boys in my troop were people I'd known my whole life. We were all very close, knew each other very well, and trusted each other. We'd been hiking for 5 days or so, and it was miserable. It rained every day, and we were all exhausted, sore, hungry, and covered with blisters. The adults realized we'd bitten off more than we could chew in trying to hike a 60-mile trail, especially with the awful weather, so we'd changed course and gotten off the trail to spend the night in a drive-in campground. The kind of place with hookups for RVs, picnic tables, fire pits/grills, and a central bathhouse with showers and toilets. It was in a very remote area far from a town or a house. There may have been a few other small groups there, but if there were, we never interacted with or saw any of them. We were all filthy and wet and thus very excited about taking a hot shower. It was dark, and we'd finished dinner. A group of 5 of my friends, including my friend Jeremy, who, like everyone else in our group, I had known since we were babies, headed up to the bathhouse, which was maybe a quarter-mile walk through the pitch-dark woods up a worn-down gravel walking trail. I stayed behind to clean up and, after 10 or 15 minutes, followed them by myself. I had a weak little flashlight, the old incandescent kind, pre-LED. I remember the woods were totally silent. When I got about halfway to the bathhouse, I could see the light from it off in the distance through the woods. I heard a noise to my left and I looked over and saw my friend Jeremy standing by an old school manual water pump about 20 feet off the trail. The kind of pump where you raise and lower a handle to pump water up from a well. There was a strange light around him like the moon had come out from behind the clouds. I was startled to see him there by himself in the woods off the trail. I asked him if he was already done with his shower. He seemed kind of sad and he said, "Yeah, it's all yours." I said okay and didn't think much of it until I got to the bathhouse. When I walked in the door, my friends were all in there and I heard Jeremy talking from in the shower. All the blood drained out of my head, and all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I had to sit down before I passed out. My friends were freaked out and wanted to know what was wrong. I told them what had happened. They nervously made jokes about how I must have been smoking pot. This was long before any of us had experimented with any mind-altering substances, but I could tell they believed me. Like I said, we'd known each other forever and knew when one of us was exaggerating or playing a joke. We all waited together until everyone was finished showering and brushing teeth and whatnot, and then walked back together in total silence. When we got to the spot where I had seen whoever, he was gone without a trace. The water pump was there, though. No one had noticed it before because it was a ways off the trail and obviously not in use. We got back to our campsite and went to bed, freaked out. I remember not sleeping much that night. In all the years since then, I've never been able to figure out what happened. Was there a random teenage boy in the woods who looked just like my friend? Unlikely. Did I hallucinate it? Also unlikely. Who's to say? When I was a kid, I was taken to visit a great aunt in the country. Old house bordering on dense cornfields. The grown-ups were chatting around the picnic table and I walked towards the yard. I looked up and saw a kid my age, about 30 yards away, standing by the corn. He was wearing old-time clothing. Like the little rascals. I turned to look at the grown-ups and looked back and he was gone. No sign of movement through the corn. Later in life, I was working in an office that used to be a meeting hall. There were stairs to the front door, a landing and 10 more stairs leading into the offices. I was leaving and when I got to the top of the stairs, a middle-aged woman came in. She was wearing completely authentic 1950s garb. Dress, jacket, pillbox hat, Jackie O haircut. This was in the 2000s. The only time you see that is in movies. I paused and asked if I can help you, and she asked if this was where they held AA meetings. I said there haven't been meeting there for many years. I looked away and she went out the door. I went down and when I opened the door, she was gone. Others in that office claimed to have seen that woman. If you ask me, I do not believe in ghosts. I don't. Whenever I say that, my wife reminds me of these stories. I can't explain these types of experiences. I still don't believe in ghosts. When I was younger, I was sleeping with my girlfriend at her place. I was laying on my back and woke up to the sound of something opening the door. I leaned forward to see if it was one of her cats. They did open the door from time to time. To my horror, I was greeted by a giant figure in the doorway. I was petrified. I'm a big man, 6 feet 3 inches, but something about this thing just terrified me. I felt small and weak. As if the physical world wanted to torture me, I realized I was unable to move. I just sat there. I could somehow turn my head, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't lift my hand to wake my girlfriend. I couldn't do anything but stare at this thing as it walked into the room. I was freaking out now. A few seconds had passed and I could feel my heart wanting to burst from my chest. I heard my girlfriend whimper. I wanted to glance at her, but I couldn't take my eye off this beast that was now making its way to the foot of the bed. I tried to yell, but it only came out as a groan. It was like my throat was paralyzed. I kept trying to speak. Say something. Go away or Jesus help me. I was desperate and couldn't think. I recalled an old memory from Bible school that demons fled at the name of Jesus, but as if it knew that, it had paralyzed my throat. It leaned forward and put 2 massive paws on the bed. Paw is the best term I can think of to describe this thing's hand. By that time, I was finally able to squeak out a tiny, garbled sentence, Holy Jesus, God help me. Whatever this thing was stopped moving, and slowly backed out of the room. As soon as it left, my girlfriend shot up. She was crying and said, "What was that thing?" I didn't know. We cried together for a few minutes before we decided to stay up and watch movies for the rest of the night. That next day she wanted to go to church. She was an atheist and I was barely a Christian for the most part. But that thing terrified us, and we both saw it. It was really hard to sleep the next few months. Fortunately, I've never seen anything like it since. My mom and dad own a house in the middle of the countryside in central France. Why there me and my dad went to chop fallen trees and bring them back to the house to store. We must have been 400 meters plus from the nearest road or track, and while cutting the logs and moving them I kept seeing small brown/black things moving from left to right up and down. I thought at first it was a bird that we had disturbed. I kept seeing them, must have counted about 30 or so times I had to seen this small thing moving in completing random or strange directions. I never ever saw them front on and it was always out the corner of my eye. A good few days went past and I spoke to my dad about it and started to explain what I had seen. He went really quiet and didn't say a lot, which is very odd for my dad. He just looked at me and said I saw them too and he didn't know what they were and he has never seen them since, and this was probably 5 years ago. I feel like I saw what I can only explain as the devil. I was in the back seat of a truck with my parents in the front. We were driving down a highway that was known to pretty much be built on top of old burial grounds. There was some tall grass poking out of a ditch and we passed this large mass. At first only I saw it. It was easily 7 or 8 feet tall and had that goat man look to him. Further down the highway my stepdad kept noticing something running across the highway and behind the truck and he couldn't really tell what it was. We stopped at the side of the highway to get an idea of where we were and there was this abandoned house just behind the bush. My stepdad left me and my mom at the truck and went to go explore it. He came running back freaking out because the place lit up like there were dozens of candles there and he said he didn't see or hear anybody in there. Once we got home I don't remember much other than falling really ill. My mom told me I turned just pale when we got home. I sat in our living room with a killer headache and the worst nausea I had felt in my life. My dreams that night were not pleasant either. I was planning to move a 600-pound safe, about 10 blocks. My father was a World War II Army engineer, so I grew up rigging ambitious DIY projects involving heavy things. I got the safe up on an industrial dolly, 1/4 inch at a time using wedges and levers, and was planning to have a team help guide it down the street at night to the destination. It had to be moved that night, or I would lose it, but then a pretty serious hurricane hit and all of my workers canceled. It was move it or lose it, so I took a shot at doing it myself, and unsurprisingly the cart hit a missing cobblestone, and the safe tipped over. I was in the middle of an active city street just south of Canal in NYC, visibility was near zero, and there was a real danger of getting hit by a car while wrestling a safe onto a cart in the middle of the road in a hurricane. Then a 6'4" broad-shouldered black man came walking briskly towards me from around the corner. He was carrying a huge umbrella, and wearing a tuxedo. "Let's get this up there before you get killed out here," and he got it back on the cart quickly, with me following his directions. Then, soaked to the bone and without further comment, he disappeared into the hurricane. I was riding a 4-wheeler around the mountains nearby a property my father owns. I was just kind of checking out the land, and whatnot. Learning where the paths go, etc. I figure, if we have property up here, I may as well know how to get around. The area is basically a mix of mountain, forest, and then plains in the valleys. At the time we were up there, my father and I were the only people up there. While I was riding along this one trail, I came across this absolutely massive moose. Now, I have nothing but mountain and forest going upwards to my right, and a sheer cliff with forest to my left. This moose squared up with me, as if to warn me that it was gonna attack if I came any closer. As slowly and carefully as I could, I turned the 4-wheeler around, and zipped away. Looking back, the moose was just gone. I stopped, and just stared back there for a minute. This thing had to be like 10 or more feet tall. I would have been able to see it if it had just gone right back up the path. So I was like, did it go over the edge of the cliff? And started to look for it. I slowly drove back there, and looked around. It just seemed to have completely vanished. There is no way I can think of that it could have left my capable line of sight, other than going right over the cliff. Something about this whole thing just made me feel really uneasy. I can't really explain why, but it did. I hightailed it back to our camp spot, and we just went on with the rest of the day as planned. A few days later, we saw on the news that there were several landslides, one of the largest of which was on the path that I was riding on, just up the path from where I had been stopped by the moose. What would have happened if I had rode up that path some more? Would I have triggered the slide? Would I have been caught in it? It's such a fascinating, and befuddling thing. Either way, that moose being where it was stopped me. The fact that it just disappeared weirded me out. It may have very well saved my life. I saw a Thunderbird. It was probably 1990 to 1992, maybe. My mom and I were driving through a pretty rural part of our town in South Alabama. At that time, my mom's car was a Ford Tempo, later became the Ford Escort, I think. We rounded a curve and a large, like scary large, bird was in our lane of the road, in front of the car. My mom braked and we came to a complete stop directly in front of this bird. The bird was large enough that it was looking into the vehicle, through the windshield, over the top of the hood. My mom and I sat silently, stunned, looking back at this bird as he looked at us. It was bizarre, because my mom and I never shut up. To this day, we talk to each other so much that my sister resents how close we are. Mom's my bestie. The bird sat there, looking at us, for no discernible reason, for several minutes. There was no roadkill or anything that would draw a vulture, but aside from that, this was no buzzard. His coloring was brown, with a white chest, a hooked, yellow bill and ducking huge talons. When he finally took off, his wingspan was the width of the entire road. At the time, we had never heard of a Thunderbird, apart from the car. We both went crazy researching birds, and after the advent of the internet, we went even crazier. There's no bird on Earth that looks like the bird we saw, and the closest match is an Asian bird, a something sea eagle or golden eagle, neither of which would be roaming ducking Mobile, Alabama for any reason. My mom and I eventually gave up on thinking this creature was something explainable. Mom is more religious than I, and sometimes jokes it was an angel, stopping us from getting in a car accident further up the road. She bought us matching Thunderbird necklaces, which we both wear. I'm so grateful I wasn't alone when I saw this thing, as I know how insane it sounds. The whole event took maybe 5 minutes. It was amazing, and I can still remember it like it was yesterday. But the strangest, weirdest part was the way the bird looked at me and my mom. It was intelligent. It looked through the windshield and made prolonged eye contact with both of us. This ducking bird was eyeballing us, like it recognized us, or it knew something. That's the part I still remember most clearly, and the part that still gives me chills. That ducking Thunderbird knew us, and was trying to communicate or ducking decide our fates, or something. That's the part I don't tell people often. That's the part that I only really talk to my mom about. Because that's the part that makes me sound the looniest. I sound like one of those I got abducted by an alien, people. But I saw a Thunderbird. And that Thunderbird saw me. My lifelong best friend told me on more than one occasion that he believed something had been following him his whole life. Usually it would just be doors opening or closing on their own, a figure in the dark, or weird noises, like jumbled whispering that can't be made out. I even once heard something like that come over his microphone while on a Skype call with him back in high school while we were playing a video game together and I was waiting for him to update something on his end. He says it doesn't happen often, and it had been happening less frequently as he got older, and now I haven't heard anything about it for years, but here's what really makes it weird. My friend went on a several-month-long, cross-country fly fishing trip with his dad near the end of high school. Among their activities, they hiked to the peaks of some mountains in the Rockies. My friend brought along a film camera, as he and his dad often did. Upon getting the photos developed, we looked at a selfie my friend took with the camera on top of the mountain. Just his smiling face and the gravel top of the mountain ridge behind him, blue sky above him. But about 25 to 30 feet behind him, is this crazy looking, blurry, several foot tall black smudge of a humanoid shadow, with long, wiggly arms extended, twisted blurry legs stepping over the gravel terrain haphazardly, as if it's awkwardly following behind him in a hurry to catch up. Shit is unsettling. It's a clear, well-lit photo otherwise. This figure is just blurry, completely black, and wiggly goofy as hell, but clearly humanoid in shape. My friend says there was nothing there around him when he took that photo. His dad was hiking just ahead of him and they were alone on the mountain with clear, long lines of sight all around them. If someone was that distance away from them on that mountaintop at that moment, there's no way they wouldn't have known. And even if they came out blurry from motion, how in a sunny, well-lit, uniform environment, would that come out completely black and distorted? My friend is adamant that it's the thing that he had always felt was following him. I was driving such a long way, interstate, Australia, that I stopped for the night to camp in a national park in a remote area with no one around. In the middle of the night, I awoke to someone walking around the outside of my tent where I just lay completely still, wide awake, ready to fight for my life. To say I was scared shitless is an understatement. Then I heard the footsteps leave the area, no car noises. I lay wide awake until morning. When I got up, there was no one around and that was the end of it. I have thought about that incident a fair bit. I've considered the possibility it was an animal. But I can still remember how it walked. It sounded 100% human. While it's not absolutely impossible someone could be walking in the wilderness by themselves in the middle of the night. Why? And what was the interest in my tent? If they were sinister, why didn't they do something? I don't camp deep in the bush by myself anymore. Sleep paralysis demon? Yeah, that crap is real. Scariest experience in my life. I can still feel that faceless monster's hands strangling my neck. Ever since my 10th birthday, I've been having dreams that would randomly manifest in the actual future. I have extremely vivid dreams all the time. And I never know which ones are the dreams and which ones are the future until they actually happen. But when it does happen, every tone the déjà vu strikes, it's like a shockwave in my consciousness, almost as if it were being reawakened each time. And what's even more strange, it'll always hit me physiologically. My heartbeat pummels the inside of my chest, and I feel like my eyes become 10x more exposed to light. I become extremely alert, and I'm gasping for air as if my fight or flight is kicking in after forgetting to breathe. And my mind is always pushing at speeds fast beyond what I'm used to. Till this day, it's still a strange phenomenon that'll never fail to catch me off guard. Edek what to do about it besides talk or write about it. It's not like people will actually, truthfully believe it anyways. My jewel was missing. For months. Little buggers are sneaky devils, and also magnetic, so losing them is part of the game. I hoped it would just turn up and it didn't. Whatever. It especially sucked because I couldn't just go out and buy one because good old Governor Baker banned the sale of them en masse. I just sucked it up and eventually ended up borrowing a friend's when I got feisty. Last week my boyfriend and I were away on vacation, and I took my lone jewel with me because I'm an addict. And everything was great. When we got home from our trip on Thursday evening, we walked into the dining room and went to plop all our shit on the table as we always do when we arrive, and sitting right in the middle of the table is my missing jewel. I know it's my missing jewel because it has a piece of Hello Kitty duct tape across the bottom of it. My BF and I live alone, and no one was in the apartment. We brought our cat and even our houseplants to his parents before we left. The mail was just put through the slot, and we can control the heat and lights from an app, so it made it look like someone was there. Hence no need for anyone to check up on things. But alas, there in the middle of the table, was my jewel that I had ran through every nook and cranny of the entire apartment looking for. There is no way we could have missed it. That table is the first thing anyone sees when they walk in our place. It makes zero sense. We were in a town outside Puerto Vallarta on holiday. In the middle of the outdoor market was a small church that we decided to check out. For some reason I felt really connected to it. I felt compelled to pray and light a candle. As we were leaving the church courtyard, a little girl across the small brick road was pointing at me, pulling her mother towards us, and she was calling me Coco Coco. The mother was pulling against her, saying, "Quien? No la conocemos. ¿Quién es Coco? Who? We don't know her. Who is Coco?" I froze. I locked eyes with the little girl. She was so excited and happy to see me. I didn't know her either, but I smiled to be polite. And in that moment it dawned on me. My little sister used to call me Coco when she was very little. I hadn't heard anyone say that name to me in over 30 plus years and had not thought about that nickname or told anyone about that nickname ever. It was alarming yet comfortably familiar. The little girl's mother pulled her along up the street and we went on our way. Years later my sister is getting really into genealogy and tracing our roots. She says 4 generations back, our dad's family is from that small town outside of Puerto Vallarta. I worked nights at an office depot in the early 2000s. There were 2, at most 3 of us locked in the store overnight. The manager would let us out at 6 a.m. No one could come in or out without setting off the alarm. It started with footsteps down the hallway. My coworker and I would be in the back office printing signs, and all of a sudden you'd hear someone walking down the hallway towards us. One of us would peek out and there was no one there. One night we're working and around 3 a.m. the store phone keeps ringing. My coworker finally picks it up, listens for a few seconds, then says, "Sorry, you have the wrong number." And hangs up. Rings again. Same girl. He hangs up. Calls again. This time he puts her on speaker. She's crying, sobbing, "Why won't you talk to me? What's wrong with you?" Coworker, "Ma'am, you have the wrong number. Stop calling." He hangs up. He looks at me, and says, "This is ducking weird, man." I tell him it's just some crazy chick calling. No biggie. Phone rings again. He puts it on speaker. "I'm not crazy." Click, she hangs up and never calls again. Scared the ever-loving shit out of us. One night I'm stocking the supply side of the store, envelopes and stuff like that. My coworker comes running over from tech and heads to the next aisle over. He says there is someone in the store. I think he's messing with me, but he's clearly disturbed by it. We search the store and no one is there. I asked what he saw and he says there was a man walking parallel to me on the next aisle. He was up on the ladder stocking printers and saw him. He was extremely spooked by this. One night 3 of us are working together on one aisle, Goofing off really, and we hear man's voice on the other side of the store yell out, "What the hell?" at the top of his lungs. It scared all of us so badly we called the morning manager. He was not happy and told us to quit ducking around. When I took off 2 weeks for my honeymoon, the guy they got to cover for me lasted 1 week before he quit. I ran into him a few weeks after I got back and asked him what happened. He said he couldn't do it. He kept seeing people standing there out of the corner of his eye, but when he looked there was no one there. The night crew stopped when I left. My coworker quit and they hired a woman to replace him. Her second night she came up to me and said the back of her neck was on fire. I looked and she had these fresh, deep red scratches running from her neck to the middle of her back. It scared the hell out of her. That was the last straw for me. I quit a few days later. I once experienced a Groundhog Day. Just one repeated day though. I was 30 years old, couch surfing in Los Angeles at the time. I went to sleep on a Friday night around 1 a.m., having spent the day in a pretty standard end of the week fashion. Had a flight booked on Saturday, late morning, to attend my grandfather's interment to Arlington National Cemetery on Sunday. I slept like a rock and woke up in a panic. Certain that I was too late to commute to LAX, scrambled to find my phone and read the same date as was displayed the previous morning. And the day name, Friday. I yelled at Google to tell me what day it was in California. Several times. I had very little going on in my life those days, and so had no text conversations or email threads from the first Friday to pull as evidence. I did, however, make a transaction on the first Friday through Western Union. Despite several attempts, they have been unable to produce documentation of the transfer. A car accident that didn't happen. I was about to make a turn. I looked both ways and saw absolutely zero incoming traffic. I turn right and bam. I am hit and my front bumper comes off. There is zero reason for this accident to happen as the road had absolutely no cars on it and I could see down for a good quarter of a mile both ways. I am dumbfounded. He asked how I didn't see him and I was in too much of a shock to answer. This accident could not have happened as there were no cars on the road. My eyesight is good, so I don't understand how I could miss an obvious car coming down the road. Speed limit was 35, so even a speeding car I would notice. His car only had a minor scrape while my front bumper was torn off, also my headlight was busted. He decided to just paint over it, but we exchanged our insurance info and went on our separate ways. I put my bumper into the back seat and went to work. I didn't get any phone call or anything regarding the accident. When I left work that afternoon, I noticed my bumper was now on and attached. No signs of damage, no busted headlights, nothing. The notebook where I had written the guy's information no longer had it. And my phone where I took pictures. The pictures were gone. To this very day I cannot explain it. Did I hallucinate an entire car accident? Imagined it? Or did the universe decide it really was impossible for the accident to happen and thus reversed it somehow? I don't know. I cannot make any sense of it. One time I was running a high fever, talking 40 degrees Celsius, so I was in that state where you are freezing but at the same time boiling. It was hell. So I fell asleep, and found myself in a cobblestone street with lots of fog, and I am amazed because the temperature is not cold but also not warm either, so it is a little unsettling, so I decide to go down the street and I start hearing voices. Hello? I am here, can you see me? Help me. They are all yelling and I see people just standing there in the fog looking at random places, so I come close and ask someone something but they do not notice me, almost as if I was invisible to them, and they looked desperate. This of course freaked me out, so I ran and I ended up in some sort of DMV style building with a creature smoking a cigarette outside. It looked like one of those Mexican hairless dogs but with spots that resembled a skeleton in his skin. I do not know why, but they seemed friendly to me. So, since I am freaking out, naturally I went inside the building only to find a bussy waiting room with more of those creatures doing what public sector workers do best at the DMV, slacking off and chatting to each other. I take a number, 33, alright, I suppose there's not a lot of people in front of me, and they were. The number in the screen was 5, so I sat down for literally 40 minutes waiting for my turn, and I get called by an elderly creature behind the front desk. It even had glasses and his bone markings were a little yellowish, like old bones. Name? I gave it my name. The creature types on the computer. Yeah, I don't have you on my system. May I have your death comprobant? My what? It's that sheet of paper that says that you are officially dead. You should have one. No, I do not have anything. I just appeared here. The creature looks like it is a long day and he has had it with this crap, so it says you don't have one. No, and you don't appear in the system either. Well, leave. What? Leave. And I woke up, no fever, no sickness, nothing. I was cured. A friend of mine says those were Wendigos. I say they are Zoloitskanals in their true form, Anyway, moral of the story: do not lose your papers if you die, otherwise I am pretty sure I walk through purgatory. Also, try to die with a book on your pocket. I hear things in my house. One late night, 3 a.m., I was in the kitchen and I heard a cell phone buzz like a phone on vibrate. It sounded like it was coming from underneath the floor. I only have one cell phone in my house and it wasn't mine. My cell was in my room at the other end of the house, and even if I have music on, I can't hear it from the kitchen. I have heard a man and a woman talking, whispering loudly. I have heard noises under my house, smelled a man's cologne one day and brutal man's body odor a few days later, knocking on the side of my house, and I heard a man sneeze the other night and I came home to find my kitchen window open. I don't ever open it ever. I went into my bathroom and found a dark pubic hair on my toilet seat, not the first time, and I don't have pubic hair. I called the cops. They said there isn't anything they can do, so just check underneath my house to see if anyone is living there. I checked and nope, but I haven't checked my attic. I feel sick about going up there. I will do it in the next few days. If someone is up there, they won't get far unless they made friends with the dog when I was out. My dog is very protective and has barked really late at night and has woken me up. By the time I get clothes on, and run around the house trying to see what he is barking at, whatever it is gone. When I was young, about 7-ish years old, I saw a young boy in a blue t-shirt running around our backyard. The thing was, the area we lived in was extremely rural. We had exactly one neighbor, and he didn't have any children. If there had been a kid that somehow got lost and wandered onto our property, he would have had to travel from miles away. I mentioned him to my mom and she went out to look for him. She never saw him, and chalked it up to my imagination. Until a few nights later, when he showed up in our living room. I didn't see him that night, but she saw a boy in a blue t-shirt run across the living room and hide behind a chair. Of course, when she looked behind the chair, he wasn't there. Freaks me out if I think about it. I don't really believe in ghosts, and what exactly was he haunting anyways? We were the first people to live in our house. It was brand new when we moved in. Our land wasn't even completely cleared off yet, so if the land had been previously occupied, it was a long damn time ago. Long enough that blue t-shirts definitely wouldn't have been a clothing option. It's a mystery I'll never solve, unfortunately. A friend and I decided to go to a diner for a late night meal. We were both home and one of us texted the other to see if they wanted to come eat. I ended up driving and I picked up my friend and we went to a diner in Fort Lee, New Jersey. We went to this particular diner cause my friend was friends with someone who used to work there. Anyways, we both were disappointed in our food. It was poorly made by NJ diner standards. Neither of us finished our meal and decided to head home. While driving, I got distracted by our conversation on how bad the food was and made the right turn too early. I turned into Route 4 and wanted Route 46 instead. Since we were in no rush, neither of us thought it was a big deal. I saw an exit to Grand Avenue, which is where we wanted to go to from Route 46, so I took it. It didn't take us where we were expecting. I thought maybe if we kept driving we would eventually pass through a part of Grand Avenue we recognized. We quickly realized we were in an odd place. I say this because we were driving in the woods. This part of NJ is right outside of NYC and is very developed. As we are driving, we see an abandoned car to the left of us. The car didn't look old or beat up. We were questioning why someone would leave their car there, then suddenly we see a police car up ahead. I figured we would go up to the officer and ask for directions or at least find out where we were. As we approached the police car, we notice all its lights are on and the driver's side door was open. We saw no one around us and started seriously wondering WTF is going on. The road up ahead curves and the trees block our view of the what's ahead. I see red light coming through the trees and figure we are close to civilization again. We finish with the curve and I realize that the red light is coming from the moon. This was no ordinary moon. It covered the entire sky. It was so close you can see all the craters easily. They were filled with what appeared to be blood. Some of them appeared to be overflowing with blood, leading to rivers of blood. The best way I can describe this is to imagine a volcano spewing blood. I am watching all this while driving in silence. I say to myself that my food must have been drugged or that I'm having a mental breakdown. I tell myself I'm not going to mention what I'm seeing, drop my friend home, and then drive myself to the hospital. As I'm observing the bloody moon that appears so close that it will crash into the earth, I'm pondering what is wrong with me. After several minutes of silence, my friend says to me, "We're going to die." I ask him why he would say that, and he looks at me and says, "Don't you see the moon? It's covered in blood and it's going to crash and kill us all." Believe it or not, when he said this I felt a huge sense of relief because at least I'm not hallucinating. We both can't see the same hallucination at the same time. I tell him the truth about why I stayed silent when I saw it. I describe what I see and he points out various parts in the moon and we both quickly come to the conclusion that we are looking at the same thing. Oddly enough, we are calm. I explain that I don't believe that we are looking at the moon cause if it was truly as close as it appeared we would experience its gravitational effects. We both agree that death is at hand. Some time passes and the road has another steep curve. The trees block out the sky and the red light from the moon continues to shine from them. After driving though the curve, the woods abruptly end. I stop the car and we both look behind us. The bloody moon is gone. I tell my friend this doesn't make sense and we need to go back into the woods. He refuses and demands to be dropped off at his home. I drop him off and duplicate the drive I made earlier to get back to the moon. I couldn't even find the woods again. The exit to Grand Avenue didn't lead to the same place as before. For the next several days I drive around and go through Yahoo Maps and MapQuest to try to find the woods but could not find anything close enough to be a candidate. We both talk about it to this day and try to find some meaning in it. My friend was more open to people about what he saw than me and people tended to think he was crazy or super religious. I stayed relatively silent since I know no one would believe me.